I'm Leanne,
And I'm Mike, the marriage maker.
and this is Unschooled History. It is our anniversary this week 13 years.
Yep.
And we wanted to do something wedding and marriage related. We both like the Victorian era, so we decided to talk about Victorian marriage in this week's episode. Naturally, we can't do that without talking first about the marriage of Queen Victoria. Victoria was 18 when she took the throne in 1837. And on February 10th, 1840, she married her cousin, Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, which remained the family name of the royal family in the UK until World War I, when it was changed to a more British-sounding Windsor. Victoria and Albert were married in the chapel at St. James Palace. She wore a gown of white silk and lace. The cake was a traditional fruit cake, weighed 300 pounds, used 12 pints of brandy in making it, and in 2016, a slice of it sold for 1,500 pounds sterling.
And just in case you were wondering, folks, I did have one thing to say. When it comes to Queen Victoria, here comes the bride. She wrote the guide. She's the one who got it started. Most of our traditions.
It really was the wedding of the century, and a lot of brides wanted to imitate her, especially brides within the upper classes, and that applied to both sides of the Atlantic Ocean.
Or the pond, as the Brits call it.
Let's talk more about that dress. Queen Victoria described her choice of dress in her journal thusly: I wore a white satin dress with a deep flounce of Honiton lace, an imitation of an old design. My jewels were my Turkish diamond necklace and earrings, and dear Albert's beautiful sapphire brooch. Instead of a tiara, she wore a wreath of fresh orange blossoms, a symbol of fertility. Her engagement ring was a gold snake ring set with her birthstone and emerald, and her wedding shoes were of white satin. White, y'all. White. That's the color of wedding dresses today. So you're like, okay, Leanne, why are you freaking out about her having a white wedding dress? Well,
She was the bride. She wrote the guide. She was the first, ladies.
most people wore colored dresses at the time of their weddings. And actually, Mary Queen of Scots wore a white dress when she got married the first time. But that was a one off. Red was actually a very popular color for wedding dresses. And when you think of a red wedding dress, you normally think of Asia today.
Yeah.
China, especially, a red wedding dress is very popular. And in India. Japan, it's the white kimono. But in the Victorian era and the time immediately predating it, it was red. That was a very popular color. Blue and yellow were also very popular colors. And also practical colors such as gray or black. In fact, Laura Ingalls, upon her marriage to Almanzo Wilder, wore a black dress because it was practical. You don't see dirt on black. White was new, and it was about conspicuous consumption.
Mhm.
We say now, oh, it's about the bride's purity. No, no, it was about conspicuous consumption. And it was Victoria's dress that set the trend, and from then on, the white wedding dress was the desire of the wealthy, and by the end of the Edwardian period, the desire of all brides in the West. So there you go. Queen Victoria set the trend. Let's talk age of consent now. Some of you may recognize this scene from Gone with the Wind. It's from the double wedding of Scarlett O'Hara to Charles Hamilton, along with his sister Melanie to Ashley Wilkes. What you may not know, unless you've actually read the book like I have, is that Scarlett is only 16. She's only 16, people. She's so strong-willed.
She's a teenager.
She's a teenager. Teenagers apparently have always been super strong-willed. And by the time of the U.S. Civil War, in England at least, the age of consent to marriage for young ladies was only 12 and 14 for boys. In fact, about 1820s was, so before Victoria even got married, before she even sat on the throne, before the Victorian age even started, was when that age of consent got so low. But the average age during the Victorian period was 18 to 23, at least among the upper classes. Sometimes you might have some girls of the lower classes get married quite a bit younger. And anything above 23, you are considered an old maid. You're a spinster. So yeah, there we have it. She's 16, people. Scarlett is 16 in that scene. And honestly,
She don't look it.
she don't look it. But then this was Vivian Leigh, and she never looked. She never looked it. She never looked that young. But you know, that was actually common back in the 1800s.
Yeah.
Children were considered miniature adults.
Yes.
During the Victorian and Edwardian periods, and really, it wasn't until child labor was really banned in the late Edwardian period and thereafter that you really had and you had the child labor laws coming in. It wasn't until then that children were really allowed to just be children.
Yeah.
So really, that's not surprising that she didn't look 16. Not that most 16-year-olds today look 16 anymore. These kids are so busy playing makeup and dress up and trying to look older. They just, I don't know. So there you go. Next, we're talking about the dowry, and this is a Victorian dowry chest or hope chest. We might call it a cedar chest today if it's made of cedar. In Australia, the term is a glory chest. The Germans call it a dower closet or dowry closet. The Arabs use a similar term.
Okay.
Dowry has always been important in history. It was especially important for the Victorian era bride. Her dowry was supposed to show that she was worthy of marrying a man and equal to his station. You did not marry outside of your station in the Victorian era. Trying to move upwards made you an upstart. Marrying down made you, well, it was frowned upon.
Yeah.
So you married within your station. And the dowry could consist of money, land, clothes, dishes, jewelry, etc. It was essentially, at minimum, a down payment on the young woman's inheritance, if not the whole thing. So that's how important it was. And that's why many poor brides actually had trouble getting married during the Victorian era. If you were born into an impoverished family and you cannot provide a proper dowry for yourself at all, then you either didn't get married Or you got really, really lucky, and someone at church who was wealthier would take pity on you and provide a small dowry for you so that you could at least have that to start off married life with. And that was it. That's how important a dowry was. You needed a dowry to get married. No dowry, no marriage.
Yep.
Obviously, we're back on dresses again. Partly because I'm somewhat obsessed with fashion. Michael will tell you that.
Just a wee bit.
Just a wee bit?
Just a wee bit.
Blame my editor.
Which one?
I only have one editor, Michael. I only have one editor. And she's made me much more fashion conscious than I used to be. That and all the time I spend watching the Dolce and Gabbana fashion shows because they're fun to watch. Gucci was terrible to watch this year. I hated Gucci's. Oh my god.
Well,
Okay, sorry, y'all. Back to this. Okay, so we're jumping to the other side of the pond. 20 years after Queen Victoria made the white wedding dress fashionable in the wedding of the century, the U.S. found itself facing war. Earlier, we showed you that still from Gone with the Wind, but Scarlett and her peers were of the plantation aristocracy of the Old South. Also earlier, I mentioned Laura Ingalls Wilder's wedding dress being black. That was post-Civil War, and Laura was a farm girl for most of her life, only really entering the middle class, especially the upper middle class, after she and Almanzo moved to Mansfield, Missouri, and then they lost everything pretty much in the Great Depression. So that sucked for them.
Yes.
I've been to Rocky Ridge Farm, by the way. It's cool. They have pause fiddle. Okay, moving on. This dress is more typical of a middle-class family that really started to emerge during the Victorian era. During the industrialized age that came with Victorian England, we really started to get more of a middle class. Yes, it was starting to emerge a little bit during the Renaissance, but this was when we really started to get the middle class, and it was really starting to boom and flourish. And I went searching for this dress based on the description of a Missouri girl's wedding dress from 1859. And I couldn't find the exact dress, but I found this, and it's somewhat close. It's made from a fabric called linsey woolsey, which is a coarse twill fabric woven with a linen warp and a woolen weft. For those of you not familiar with weaving terms, the warp is the vertical strands, the weft is the horizontal. Linsey woolsey was warm, durable, and inexpensive, but not very pretty. In this dress, you can see the dropped shoulders, typical of the time period. The description that I found mentioned a necklace neckline, and I'm not sure what is meant by that. I had never seen that term before. I went through all of my resources that I've ever been able to find on necklines and terms for the different parts of a dress. I cannot find it anywhere else. I can only assume that it is referring to either a jeweled neckline, which is the type of neckline you might find on a t-shirt, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Or a neckline like this is a very shallow V meant to show off a necklace. Like I said, you've got the drop shoulders. The description that I read mentioned a tight bodice, which you have there, the fitted bodice, and flowy sleeves, which you have right here. You can see. And honestly, they're gorgeous. I love these sleeves. I would totally wear a dress like this of Lindsay Woolsey because, let's face it, it's itchy and I don't like itchy things. It's what I hated about my wedding dress. All the lace was itchy. Well, that was one of the things I hated about it, but you know. And then you have the very full skirt, and this honestly could easily have belonged to a middle class woman getting married in either the North or the South. I would honestly consider this probably borderline between North and South.
Yeah.
There were some differences in fashion between the two because the North was very industrialized, the South was
Agrarian.
very agrarian, but I would say this was, in fact, I would say this is probably something like Roxana Ray might have worn when she got married to John Ray.
Yeah. Done.
Yeah,
Wilson
Wilson
Creek National Battlefield.
In fact, I would not have been surprised to learn that she wore a dress just like this. This is a plaid design. Other designs would have included maybe something all gray, but with stripes of a lighter gray or of a color like maroon, helping to break it up, or maybe just a little bit of trim. But this was very common. This was extremely common, and this is what the bride would have worn. And of course, the groom would have worn his best suit. Or especially a military groom, would have worn his
Best uniform.
best uniform. All right, the ideas have been said. Let's talk about the reception. Let's talk about the reception. In the UK, you had a wedding breakfast. Victoria and Albert had a wedding breakfast. I told you about the cake earlier, and it was covered in white icing, royal icing specifically. And if any of y'all have ever worked with royal icing, you know that it hardens, which is why they were able to make those sculptures. There was a sculpture of Britannia, the royal couple, and because we've always been obsessed with our dogs, Victoria's dog was on the cake as well. And of course, it was 300 pounds, like I said, and 14 inches tall and 10 feet across. And the white icing was a new thing. The white icing was 100% a new thing. But there was that one traditional thing that was still copied by brides across the UK and here in the US, and it was a fruit cake. It was a fruit cake. But this was the time period in which we saw these fruitcakes starting to be covered in either royal icing, which, as I said, dries really hard. And God help you if you try to bite into a flower made of royal icing. I actually chipped a tooth when I was younger trying to eat a flower made of royal icing. That was on my sister's birthday cake. Or fondant was also common, especially later in the Victorian period. Fondant is a sugar paste, a type of sugar paste. I've been known to make an excellent marshmallow fondant.
Yes, you do. You do very much so indeed.
And there's rolled fondant, and of course, which is used most often in wedding cakes, is rolled fondant. And of course, there's poured fondant as well, which is a major part of the mirror glaze that has become popular lately. And of course, it's what's inside a Cadbury cream egg. And perhaps some marzipan might be involved. Also commonly on the menu, various meats, especially turkey or ham. bread, biscuits, jellies, cakes. Ice was new and exciting, and definitely something you had to have if you were among the upper classes. Gelatin, candy, and fruit. Obviously, the poor wouldn't have such a large varied spread. But they might have a little bit of a fruit cake, maybe just some fruit or whatever. They would try and have something, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But huge varied spread for the upper classes. Okay, so today we cut the cake. Bridesmaids clamor to catch the bouquet to see who among them will be the next to marry, and groomsmen try to catch the garter. But there's another tradition. And apparently it still thrives in the American South, and I keep running into it being described as a tradition of the American South, or a Southern tradition, Southern wedding tradition, etc. But it started in the Victorian era. That's when it became popular. So we can thank the Victorian era for this. Cake charms. They were tied to ribbons, and the charms were baked into the cake. Now, nowadays, they're just slid in between the layers or underneath the first layer. But back then, they were baked into the cake with the ribbon sticking out, and each would have a different meaning, such as in this more modern set seen here. For example, a penny would be for wealth, a ring for the next to marry, an anchor for hope, or a shamrock or a horseshoe for luck. So I think that's pretty cool and pretty symbolic, and I honestly kind of wish we'd thought about that for our wedding.
Yeah.
Because that would have been fun to see them try and pull it, and maybe that would have gotten them to shut up about smashing cake into our faces.
Not knowing my family.
No, not knowing mine either. You're right. Never mind. All right, we are coming up around to the end here. The wedding is over, the cake's been cut, the bride has handed flowers from her bouquet to her bridesmaids. It's time for the honeymoon, and it evolved throughout the Victorian era. I mean, it was really in the 1820s when honeymoons then started called bridal tour, wedding tours, or wedding trips, bridal trips, whatever, were really became fashionable. And remember, we're talking about more than 6 decades here.
Yeah.
Like I said, she came to the throne in 1837. And she ruled for more than 60 years. Nearly 64 years, really.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of evolving here going on. For the upper classes in Europe, popular destinations included Rome, Venice, or other romantic European cities. The bride and groom would change into their traveling clothes as soon as the cake was cut, with the bride being assisted by her bridesmaids. Early on, it was considered proper for a female relative to accompany the couple everywhere. Yeah, I know. Michael has y'all can't see it, but Michael has this look of dread on his face, like, because it was usually a member of the bride's family, and he's just trying to imagine my sister going with us on a honeymoon to Europe, and being right next door in the hotel room, or maybe even sharing the hotel room with us. Yeah! He doesn't like the idea.
And having to listen to her gripe the entire way about, we're not going to fly, are we? We're not going to go by train, are we? We're not going to do this, are we?
Damn straight we're flying. And we did not go to Europe on our honeymoon. No, we went to Silver Dollar City. We spent the day at Silver Dollar City. That was our honeymoon. And actually, yeah, my parents and my sister's older kids were with us.
Yeah, then we decided to get away to our own honeymoon that evening.
Only
Ended
to...
up at the same damn hotel as them again.
Yeah! Just on a different floor. We didn't find out until later that we were at the same hotel. And by then it was too late. But yeah. By the 1860s, though, this had come to an end, blessedly. And instead, it was the best man's duty to get the couple to the steamer or to the train and to handle the baggage. And he was the only one to know where the couple was going, and he was sworn to secrecy about it, as it was considered bad luck for everyone to know. Still today, it is considered the best man's duty to, one, get the groom to the church, and two, drive the couple to the airport or whatever to get them off on their honeymoon. As Michael can attest, he was the best man when his best friend married my best friend.
Thank God the driving was handled by a professional. I couldn't have got him to shut up long enough for me to drive.
Yeah, Mike's best friend is talkative. Even more than me! No, seriously though, no, they got a limo to take them away from the reception and everything. And it was cool. Because we got to ride in the limo from the church to the reception with them, and that was fun. But it was bad luck for everybody to know where the couple was going back then.
Mm-hmm.
It's like everybody knew where our best friends were going on their honeymoon.
They told everybody.
They told everybody. And quite honestly, I can't blame them for bragging. They had a nice honeymoon. We went to Silver Dollar City, like I said. It is a 19th century theme park where everything is supposedly the year 1899. Save me.
Everything's $18.99 except for the prices.
Seriously, though, we kind of spent a whole day in the Victorian era paying very much 21st century prices. Oh, lordy, and those prices are only getting higher. Anyway, also, we're familiar with the practice of throwing rice at the wedding, but during the Victorian period, as the couple was carted off, it wasn't just rice. It wasn't. They threw satin slippers. They threw satin slippers at the carriage as it was heading away.
Oh boy.
Can you imagine us throwing satin slippers at the limo as friends tried to make their getaway? I don't think they would have appreciated it.
I don't think they would have minded the satin slippers, but if there had been any cowboys in the group, I can see some people being upset about their boot dents.
Okay, but it was good luck if one of the shoes stayed on the carriage.
Don't.
It was considered good luck. It meant good luck forever for the rest of the marriage. And the left slipper was considered to be luckier than the right. And if you got multiple shoes sticking onto that carriage, oh boy, you were lucky. In the U.S., however, actually, newly married couples of the upper classes would travel for months just visiting relatives. And they would stay with relatives for a week or so and then move on to the next one. And just visiting relatives who were too far away to make it to the ceremony. So, kind of like we did. Except we didn't do it on purpose. Okay, I admit. I'm getting a good laugh out of this. Okay, so there you go. That's all about Victorian weddings. If anybody is interested, I am going to leave a recipe for a Victorian fruitcake in the description, just in case anybody wants to try making one of these fruitcakes. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to give you the full recipe for Queen Victoria's wedding cake, because I don't think anybody wants to try and make a 300-pound fruitcake at home. It wouldn't fit in your average oven.
Especially at 10-foot diameter.
But I am going to leave a recipe for a fruitcake from that period in case anybody wants to try it. And also a recipe for royal icing if you want to try your hand at making that. And maybe trying to make your own Victorian era wedding cake. Because, let's face it, wedding themes are popular these days, and you never know, you might be planning your own wedding, and you might want a Victorian themed wedding. So, in fact, that might even be why you're watching this video if you are not subscribed to Unschooled History or just looking for history of weddings in general. And if you're not subscribed to Unschooled History,
why aren't you?
Yeah, why aren't you? Y'all, hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. Please. You'll get these awesome videos every week. Every Tuesday. We try and have an upload every Tuesday. Sometimes the upload malfunctions and